Well, cool. Maybe this helps a little bit. Yeah, just give you a quick overview of
Yeah.
how I do this thing on my side. So I'd like to keep it tight, probably around 30 minutes, give or take, and just keep it focused on. I think one of the angles that's really interesting is revenue acceleration
Yes.
globally, and
Mm,
the work you've done in the past there, and some of the insights and learnings you've sort of figured
okay.
out over many years. And then at the end, we can get into incentives. And then I think at the very end, it's sort of like, well, if you were going to do this again, how would
Mm,
you how would you do it? And would you use the same process and things and tactics, or would you do something
yeah.
a little different? And then
Yeah.
in terms of format, I'm just recording via Zoom. I don't do any like bells or whistles because I
Yeah.
want people to feel like they're listening in to just a conversation, like a business
Mm,
conversation. They're part of the team.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and so it just ends up creating a lot of trust and understanding about the people, getting a feel for them. And then I typically just extract audio and I'll do it as audio, and then I'll have
Okay.
the video file as well. I played with both in the past. I actually am seeing some early indications that audio is going to start taking back over from video simply because of multitasking. So people put the listening track in the background on their phone while they're doing other stuff on the phone. So,
I agree. I totally agree on
mhm,
that, Sean. I think people will come back and you have to be less focused, right? You can just have it in the background while you're cooking, while you're
mhm,
cleaning the house, while you're, in
mhm.
the shower, just run those conversations. Agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love the revenue side about, this compensation piece and incentives. It'd be fun conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can get started. I'll just chop out the front and the end or whatever. And yeah, I think we'll start with just intro on some of your background as well, just to give people context
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
listening. And
Let's
then my
scale.
audience, just to give
Yeah.
you a perspective,
Yeah. Yeah.
at least on LinkedIn, I mean, it's about 13,000 business owners, executives, investors, and practitioners, primarily the technology space, kind of all over the
Hmm.
map. And then, open internet, just who knows, right? Like all over the place, but mostly people interested in growth, technology, product development, strategy. That's
Okay.
really the thing. Diligence, right? Like, is there a there? So that's really the context of the folk that listen in. So it's a pretty
Okay.
experienced intellectual crowd. So yeah, any nuggets or insights? I mean, nobody knows everything.
Yeah.
So
One
yeah, you.
one fun fact on the side is I did run sales for a SaaS company in Asia. So from
Hmm,
Japan down to India, down to New Zealand, and
love it.
it was a actual, if you don't know much about insurance, but actuarial. So this was an actuarial cash flow pricing valuation system, integral to insurance companies, and
So
it's fantastic, fantastic couple of years diving into
well,
the space.
let's start there because I started my career. We could just start
Yeah, we could
before
start.
this. So I like the fluid approach. So I started
Yeah.
my career with Watson Wyatt, which became Towers Watson, which is now WTW, and I was formally trained as an actuary. And I worked on the retirement side, not the insurance side, though I interviewed
Okay.
with some of the big like
Yeah.
Cignas, right, of the world. So I'm very familiar with valuation software because my
Okay.
first thing as an intern was
Jeez,
like
you were
creating actuarial valuation software
okay. That's all.
with that.
We can
Yeah.
jump off from there and go any direction,
Hmm.
or circle into that from the insurance side. Either way, it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Let's start there and, maybe a little bit more background on yourself first and then jump into
Okay.
that as the first thing. And yeah, super. I mean, the internet is so random, isn't it? Like, what are the odds of that? Very small. So
I
small.
I did a bunch of quick side story. I did a reach out. I was sending all my contacts, and you'll if you haven't got one, you'll get one that says, "Hey, I'm really leaning into my speaking career, et cetera. Do you know somebody?" And pass my name on, and any ideas. And this one guy replied, I never had a chat with him, not sure how we connected. Some guy living in Cognac. connected from somebody. So we're talking, and he goes, "We don't by chance know a guy named Mark Saunders, do you?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Worked with him for 2 years on some killer projects. He's like a project genius. I learned so much, blah blah." And he's like, "Best mate. Get out
Oh,
of
funny.
here."
Yeah.
2 days later, he sends me a message and says, "You interviewed one of these guys I work with on your jar." So it turns
Wow.
out this other guy I interviewed on my travels, one of the 330, is a guy he collaborates with, who's an American. So this is a completely also random. Like the other one, I could see because they're both British,
Hmm.
but I met him in I met him in Malaysia, really. So anyway, it's funny. So it's that random. It's that random.
I heard this stat once, like, remember that old joke, like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yeah,
Everyone in
yeah,
the world is 6 degrees away.
yeah.
I think with the internet and social networks, the six got collapsed to three. And
It's
so it doesn't surprise me that the world is smaller and getting smaller.
look
Yeah.
at LinkedIn. LinkedIn measures
Yeah.
your third connection. That's it. And you're
Yeah.
probably on LinkedIn connected by a third to somebody. If you've got
For sure.
12,000 people, there's nobody past three for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get a couple different networks or like past career or education, and it's like,
Yes.
one hop or two hops to anything, any
It is a
company,
couple
any
hops away.
organization, yeah. So, anyways, tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more
let's,
about the background, and yeah, let's get into it.
yeah. So I was, I was at uh, the job of last resort when I was in California, went from this job to that job, sales jobs. I was an accountant to start and
Mm.
realized I was writing big commission checks to this goofy salesperson and thought if he can do it, I can do it. So I quit my accounting job with my wife was 3 months pregnant, lost my insurance. Really, a really boneheaded move. And got fired from one sales job, then the next sales job, then the next sales job. The company went under. And so found myself, as we call it, the job of last resort, an insurance person. So I took a
Hmm.
job as an insurance guy because I had a car and commissions and trips overseas and all that great stuff that I thought I deserved as a 20-something-year-old just becoming a father. And that job led me to one job, which led me to another job. And I had a freaky, weird skill, one of those I sold to companies insurance, the idea to let their employees buy insurance from me, from my company.
Mm.
So it was this kind of association thing and voluntary. I had that skill, and it happened to be that AIG, the world's largest insurance company at the time, needed that skill in Asia.
Hmm.
And so before I knew it, I was on a plane and put my family in Hong Kong, in 2001. And so it started a
Wow.
22-year adventure across Asia. I ended up living in 5 countries, Hong Kong. Then they sent me to eventually, after 12 years, I finally got into the rotation. So we had about 15 markets across the country, across the Southeast Asia. Some of these big players like Sun Life, Generali, Prudential UK, and AIG,
Hmm.
and ultimately ended up in, like I said, they spun me off to Vietnam. Then I went to Indonesia, Thailand, India, back to Vietnam, and then back home. So it was a 22-year journey. A little bit of a side wind on my insurance career in there was, as we talked, I was in the tech space, SaaS space, running sales for APAC, which is a gigantic, nearly 20 country kind of definition for Asia. Especially, it's a Western way of looking at it. We call it Asia Pacific, and because we just lump all of Asia into one giant nearly 3 billion person population. And so I was
Hmm.
running around with a SaaS operations on and basically product sales for actuarial software, valuation software into insurance companies. Was mostly my vertical, but it was a amazing career and ran some very large sales organizations. In Vietnam, my first one that I was in charge of, we had 100 offices, 100,000 agents, so
Wow.
100,000 salespeople. My last recruitment year there, we had 100,000 people sit and listen to our presentation across the country. We ran these kind of we call them financial literacy seminars, and they were recruitment seminars to get people into the insurance business and join as agents. But we educated 100,000 people on the basics of financial literacy in these. Then I went to
Wow.
Indonesia. We had 400 offices, 250,000 agents across the archipelago. It's just mind boggling numbers of people. that you would have.
Yeah.
And small meetings, small presentation meetings were 1,000, 500. 250 was an office. But, so it's normal for me to walk in and talk to 1,000 people. That was a typical weekend. Somewhere somebody had a meeting with, 200, 500,000, 2,500 people. We ran those all the
Mhm.
time. Just to, the interesting thing is, Sean, what we brought us together is talking about how to motivate them, how to get a piece of their mind share, part-time people, and get them motivated with financial incentives. And, to how do you motivate someone to go talk to friends and family about insurance? One of the most dreaded conversations anybody wants to have with their
Right.
cousin or their uncle or their nephew. And, so designing long-term contests, medium-term, short-term, weekend, 24 hours, contests. And, as I told you, I think it was the last time we talked, we got so good at it in Vietnam, really felt like we were so good at it that we would literally toss gold in a corner. The whole army would run to that corner, and then we would pack up, the gold dust would disappear after 48 hours and we'd display it in another corner with a spotlight and the whole army would run over to that corner and chase that and whatever that design was, whatever
Yeah.
that design was. And, sometimes it was to keep them entertained and sometimes it was obviously part of a larger strategic operation, trying
Mhm.
to get them to go do some behavior.
Yeah.
And money drives behavior. And we
Mhm.
could absolutely shape the behavior of the organization in a good way through incentives.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's giant. You gave a couple stats, like 100, 250,000. If you
Yeah,
added it all up, you're at any given time, it's what, like millions of
we had
people
yeah
that you were impacting with incentives?
at a regional level. Yeah, at a regional level, I think we had something like 525,000 agents across Asia with Prudential. China,
Wow.
India, Indonesia. Indonesia was still the largest. It's half the organization.
Wow.
Yeah, so we were communicating at a regional level. It's about 500,000 people. It's crazy
That's
numbers,
crazy.
really, honestly, quite
Yeah.
crazy numbers. 12 or 1,500 sales offices at that level.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's to put that into perspective. I remember, I don't know exactly the stat, but Walmart, which is like a Fortune 1,
yeah,
Fortune 5 company, they have like 1 million employees total globally, maybe a
yes,
little more now.
yeah,
Amazon's probably up there too. So basically, you take the biggest company in the world, you cut it in half, and that's how many people you were implementing incentives for to
trying to
drive
speak. Yeah,
behavior in different countries and markets and cultures. And so I guess the big question was,
yeah,
we talked about this last time, I know it as well too. It's like incentives turn people into computer program. So you have to be careful. But like, did
yes,
you how did you measure all of this? And did you do a lot of refinement and iteration over
yeah.
time, or was it like you already knew the playbook and it was like, okay, just bing, bing, and it
Mm.
was just rinse and repeat, or how much iteration was in there?
Yeah, there were some core things we knew worked, right? So you have some core, you have annual incentives, you have, longer incentives,
Mhm.
maybe 4 or 5 years kind of programs, but annual were the big ones, and then quarterly. And then we break it even down into, a sales office might run their own incentive locally. So you have these, very localized kind of cash incentives all the way up to larger trip, first world-class trip stuff, like renting
Mhm.
out the London Museum of or the UK London Museum of Science and Industry and having a dinner under Tippy, renting out the thing at night and doing cocktails and dinner. Just the Brazilian National Arts Center. These places that were
Mhm.
just you would never even be able to get in there yourself. Something you couldn't even do by yourself if you were unless you were just ultra wealthy, but impossible for the regular person to ever achieve this sort of thing. So all kinds of different levels. But man, Sean, you never knew. You just never knew. And communication, one of the biggest things was communication. How to make sure that what we were wanted to have happen, what we were asking people to do, always in a larger scheme, recognizing the impact of behavior all the way up, is communication, making sure that everything got down to the last person in the most remote location, and they understood the what and the why, and then how, making sure that skills and at the sales level, the support level was the how. But man, we measured stuff, the data, we'd get in on a Monday morning if we ran something on Friday. The launch,
Hmm.
we designed it, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, get it approved, get all the numbers, budgeting. And, because we also had actuaries checking our math. We're the distribution,
Yeah.
right? We're saying, we're we're going to run this program, and here's the number of people that get activated. Here's the premium. Here's the cost. Here's the margin that it eats, and here's our budget. And the actuaries would run ding dong, and go to the CFO, and we get approval at the last minute, and launch it. And Monday morning we'd want to know the data,
Yeah.
and what did we do wrong? What did we miss? Who performed the best? What communication channels worked? So data for us was incredibly important, especially in, like you said, modifying the next one, or if we had one ongoing, to see if we could throw a change in there in the middle, swap out some ideas. But man, hours, just hours looking at PowerPoints and looking at the ideas. This idea, that idea. How does that play into the longer term schemes? And also the corporate. We also rolled up to UK. Like for example, the Prudential UK. We rolled up to UK, and so things we did had to line up to what we were kind of driven for, what our promises were back to corporate. And even the regulatory aspect of it was also in there, making sure you don't go sideways with the regulator locally, and then
Hmm.
also the UK regulator, even a little bit more strict. But yeah, data was incredibly important to decision making.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm I've been thinking recently about this because I mean over time, especially with cryptocurrency, blockchain, it's like a lot of incentive experiments. And to your
Mm,
point on behavior, I think it's almost like two things, right? It's the very analytical behavior, like you do this, you get this.
yes,
And
yeah,
that works to a certain point, but then there's also the human stuff involved, like ego, fear, risk,
yes,
reward, like greed, envy, right? Like hunger, all of these things mean that what worked today may not work tomorrow.
yeah,
And especially as
absolutely,
cultural dynamics, political dynamics change, interpersonal dynamics change, that incentive system that used to work may not work. And you can't just rely totally on just an
no,
economic
oh no,
incentive. And so I think it's like if you really wanted to design it really, really well, you have to take both things into account. It's like human behavior as well as
mm,
the economic incentive and have enough like, what do you call it? Almost like a buffer zone, margins of
yeah,
safety in and around that. I mean, how much variability can you talk to any of that? Like, did you see any variability along this, or
yeah.
is that hypothesis I just presented accurate from your experience, or
Oh,
did you
oh,
find
it's
something different?
Yeah, I'd articulate it like this. I think there's a scale, right? I'm kind of holding up for people listening. I'm holding up kind of this angled, this kind of line. If you've
Hmm.
got a bar graph, right? It's your needs, and you're speaking to different, the same audience in a way, a larger, especially like I think whatever your program is you're designing for, you've got an
Hmm.
audience, and some of those people at one end of the spectrum are driven financially, right? They may not have that ego need. The ego need to be filled yet because they got to put a roof over their heads. They got college kids, they have all kinds of things. So they're there for the incentive mostly.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who, in our audience, incentives were no longer an issue. They were millionaires. They were
Hmm.
well off, and they were leaders. They had the car, they had the BMW, they had the house, they had everything. They had 5,000 people below them selling. So it wasn't the money, it was the ego and winning and getting and
Hmm.
achieving, and recognition is so. I mean, at some point, the money is absolutely irrelevant. It's what position am I standing on the stage? Am I number three or number five? And if I'm not number
Yeah.
one, there's going to be hell to pay, and I'm going to really go back with my team, and we're going to get the number one spot next year. So in designing the recognition is almost equally important as the financial reward, and
Mhm.
having that out there as something people can get as well. I just the recognition side, it was so much fun. We had, and that's a creative spot, and especially for
Yeah.
agents, because we can put 1,000 people in the room, and I can bring you up on stage and say, did you see Sean's numbers last month? Tell us, Sean, how did you achieve such great results?
Yeah.
Tell us your secret. Tell us what you did. And,
Yeah.
for a chance for you to, 4 months ago, you could have been a janitor, and now you're up on stage and you're you're sharing how you cultivated relationships as a janitor for 20 years, and you went to every teacher and every principal and every mom and dad that, and you sold like heck. And now here you are. And so that recognition of people's stories, the hunger to tell your story, so powerful. And and I think incentive programs where you hide because you received money, like a super executive receives 30 $30 million and they would rather not talk about it, is one thing.
Yeah.
That's one incentive program. And another one where you earn X and you get up on stage and you're going to tell the world what you did.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to see and to watch
Yeah.
people's lives get changed.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's totally the social aspect, the social dynamic, and
Yeah.
yeah,
We
we're
we
all
have
apes in some way.
We're all apes. There is Rinaldi Mudahar is one of the greatest salespeople ever lived. He's still he's alive down. He's in Indonesia, and he built the Prudential Indonesia army. I mean, those 250,000 are his people. He
Wow.
started as the head salesperson and built it from nothing to that
Wow.
the 400 offices. He made hundreds of people literal U.S. dollar millionaires, including rice farmers, stories of and the people. Just you could do a 4-part series around his career and what he's seen.
Hmm.
Just amazing
Wow.
when you see how some people can impact and lead others, into a great place, right? Just by motivation. And he had this one part when you achieve this very high level of this leadership level within an independent sales network. He would have this
Hmm.
thing. He would, every year you'd get promoted, and they'd only promote, 20, 30 people out of this 200,000 army. And he would fly the family members, whoever could come, didn't matter who it was, grandma, great grandma, fly 10 people secretly to the meeting and have them come in behind, and they would have these people walk to Celine Dion in a dark room with a candle to the front of the stage from the back, like a procession, like some sort of communion, right? Some religious event. And he'd have them standing there, and they'd play this, super powerful videos, of all these different montage of all the individuals who've been, promoted. And then as they turned around to face the audience, their family was right in front of them,
Wow.
and and just tears and whoa, man, the photo just, and for the people in the audience, imagine you're trying to imagine yourself being that person. And so I think,
Hmm.
financial motivation is an incredible component for day to day to keep us going, to kind of keep you focused on the things that it can get you and everything. But some stuff money can't buy. And there are times when we need to be clever enough to recognize that. And I think a lot of corporates can learn from these kinds of human, the human part, right? Sharing your success with people and how to do that in an appropriate way based on whatever industry you're in. Obviously, that doesn't work for everybody, but you can imagine if you're an executive or a person is say, head of sales, how would you do that in your organization? And there's clever ways to think of it.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that almost choked me up a little bit imagining that scenario of, I mean, what I love about that so much is just raising people up by their
Yeah,
bootstraps and giving them
yeah,
the capabilities where they can transform their and their families' lives. Like,
yep,
that's such a, I mean, business is one thing, but like that kind of transformation is, that's one of the reasons I get out of bed every day is to have that kind of impact. That's amazing.
yeah.
Um,
It's special. I was pretty fortunate to see some of this stuff happen and to interview some of these people. This guy that one of these guys in Indonesia, he was running. He had a full floor and a grade A office building in downtown Jakarta, the bank of a, I think it was might have been B of A building. His rent would have been, I don't know, 50,000 a month or 40,000 a month, whatever it was, whole office floor. And he was a leader. He had built his own distribution agency and he was a
Mm.
rice farmer. His parents were rice farmers in on an island. Banana story. And he started out as a gangster hustling, chasing down debt, black money debt on the streets of Jakarta. He flew into Jakarta, didn't have a job. He was a young kid. And gangster's wife was an agent with Peru. And he did some job, got paid one day, and he walked by a bookstore and said, I'm gonna buy a book. And he walked in and got Think and Grow Rich.
Wow. That's the second time that book or that phrase has come up in the last 2 weeks. The other one was at a
So
private equity event here in Nashville. Interesting.
this guy was driving, he had two Phantoms.
Jesus. I mean, because, you know, one is just not enough sometimes. You need one in different colors,
He had
different
one
day
was a
of the week,
convert.
match your outfit.
He told me he said, I bought a convertible kid because I always wanted a convertible. He says, actually, he goes, but now, in Jakarta, in Indonesia, Jakarta convertible, not very good. It's too
Oh,
hot.
man.
I never drive the
Yeah.
convertible.
Yeah. You need the AC. Wow. That's insane.
Crack up.
I mean,
Um,
here's what I hear from this, and maybe this gets into the last piece, which is if you're going to do it all over again, or
mm,
start now and build something like that, or somebody just listening in, how do you go from zero to two phantoms? You know, for lack of a better word. I mean, how do you do this? I mean, sales and
yeah.
revenue acceleration is one thing, but that assumes there's a value exchange there, right? Like
Mm,
you can't
yeah,
sell
absolutely.
nothing. Somebody on the other side of that sale has to have some
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
desire or need that
Yes.
you fill. And so, what have you found is like, I don't know, secret sauce, or how would you do it again if you were starting from scratch, or what would you do today, like with all the knowledge and
Yeah.
stories and incentives and everything else?
The first thing I always remember was you can never, we had lots and lots of discussions about how to choose people, you know,
Mm,
recruiting people and bringing people into an insurance industry. And I think this goes across. I think it was unique in us finding it just because of the high volume of people we would recruit and bring in. Um, but I think it's true across humanity, right? Whatever industry you're in,
mm,
you can never tell how hungry somebody is by the way they look, by the way they interview. You don't know the burning part of somebody inside.
mm,
That there were people we put on stage. You would never, ever in a million years stop and look at that person and think they were a sales machine or a leader. And by the looks of them on the outside. And
mhm.
now they do when you meet them later. You're like, yeah, wow. Of course they're that good. And you're like, yeah, but you didn't see their recruitment video. What you didn't see their when we interviewed them, right? You should have seen
Yeah.
that person because that's not that person. But what the difference was that was just the inside coming out, right? They had money. Now they could get a hairdresser. They could buy makeup. They could, a guy, we used to laugh and say, the men get fat and the women get beautiful in the insurance industry in Asia. The men enjoy all the stuff, right? They go out and they eat nice restaurants, they eat great food, and the ladies, take care of themselves. They look better
Mhm.
and better. So the women look younger and the men look fatter, and that's how you can tell they're successful. Um, but you can't tell on the inside. And so I think one of the things, if I was to do this differently, whatever the industry, I would always there are those questions you ask people, that burning desire. You mentioned it, getting out of bed. That's what gets you out of bed, is to
Mhm.
find that next story, right? To find that next, or to have a conversation where you impact somebody enough, Sean, where you change their business. One of these
Mhm. Yeah.
conversations hit somebody and they go, oh, that's it. I should pursue this angle. Let me get into this more. And so you get up out of bed, and we don't know what gets people out of bed and what
Yeah.
gets them focused in the morning. And so I think, that prejudgment, dismiss that from yourself, try to ask those
Yeah.
other questions about personal motivation, the money and all of that. That's on that linear scale I talked about, right? People will run for the
Mm.
money, they'll run for that. But as soon as they cross some meridian, it's not about the money anymore. The
Yeah.
money's nice and they demand the money, and they're going to be, they're going to remind you, what you owe them. They'll know that stuff backwards and forwards. That's already, that's a skill they've got. They're now on to another one, which is how to get on stage, how to move from this number fifth spot on stage to number one. So, recognition, it would be the thing also I would spend a lot more time. It took me a long time to understand that part of it, to how
Yeah.
important and how graceful and masterful the recognition can be and the impact it has on people.
Hmm. Yeah. It's
It's an art.
interesting.
It's an art. It's not a science. The
Yeah.
math part is it's both. We saw that that part is a science. The cash part, I was talking about sitting in front of a PowerPoint, modeling if these agents move or those agents move, or what agents are we going to get to go, who are the ones that aren't active, how do you motivate those? That's science, data, and then art. And that was fun because it was both. But definitely the people part is pure art, man. It's really
Hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. It is the yin and the yang. It's
Yeah,
the numbers and the emotion. We're a wave and a particle at the exact same time.
we are.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, it's the recognition. The leaderboard has some of that aspect in it for
Yeah,
competition and the financial incentive. But at the end of the day, it's like, do you have what drives you? What's your mission? What's your vision?
where are you
Like
at?
yeah, what is that thing deep down that is your reason? We talked about it like your fascination or your purpose, two sides of the
Yes.
same coin.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, what's yours? We didn't get into that last time. Do you know what yours is?
Yeah, it's been a fun journey. I think I lived a lot of my purpose. I achieved a big chunk of my purpose, and I think the next one is kind of unfolding. I've
Mm,
filling the jar. So, I quit corporate 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. Well, 2 years plus. But 2 years ago, I started a journey across the U.S. and went to 96 cities and interviewed about 330 people in their home. And real people, real conversations was that the kind of the tagline. And the jar got filled for me and for other people. It really giving people's stories a platform and lifting up regular people's voices. It's just a fantastic experience. And I at the end of that, I was like, I think I've lived that was a purpose. That was a purpose,
yeah.
and I feel like it was setting me up for the next one, right? It's giving more like
Yeah.
maybe giving me the tools, Sean. It's giving me that bedrock to kind of get to the next one. And I think it's going to be speaking, honestly, public speaking. And I don't know what the genre is going to ultimately be. I know I have some business topics. I have and I lovingly called Ken's Rules. And it turned into a business book called Dear Leaders, letters to leaders about strategy, vision, mission. I've got some funny Asian, a storyteller is what I am. I've got one called leader about team building called Tom Yum Soup. It's around Tom Yum. If you know Thai food, there's a hot sour seafood soup called Tom Yum, and it has all these crazy ingredients in it. And I blend the story into team building, that each piece of that soup has its importance. And when you're building a team,
Mhm.
they all have character, right? They all bring something to the table. And too much of one and too much of the other, spoils a soup. But it's up to the chef. In Thailand, the soup is made from north to south. It's made differently. It's got a little different accents, but they're all amazing. And
Mhm.
you go into a home and it's beautiful. In the right restaurant, it's beautiful. But each one's unique to the chef or to the chefs, what's available that day. And team building is that same way, right? You have to build a
Mhm.
balanced, complementary team, and it can't be dominated by
Mhm.
chilies or ginger or lemongrass, because then it spoils it. So don't be too homogeneous. And it's not about color or about sex. It's about skills and attributes is what you're
Mhm.
looking for. And nobody cares what color
Mhm.
the chili is. It's about how it adds
Yeah.
value to the soup.
Yeah. How's it taste overall?
How's it
Yeah.
taste? How does it complement
Yeah.
the grass and the mushrooms and the
Hmm.
the soup base? So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in that middle of the. I think I finished something I did was the jar, and it had its purpose, if you will. It was single purpose built, but it's permeating my who I am now for sure. It's changed me
Mhm.
interviewing 300 people and being in that room. You talked about particle and wave, right? It's when you know, our 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 wave was interacting. I was that close to people using the jar as a conduit. So I'm a different person now, and so I think that's still uncovering it.
Mhm. Well, what's interesting, I agree with everything you said, and I love the perspective. I think I mean, we don't know each other like for 20
Yeah.
years, but as listening to you and hearing your journey just in this tiny 30 minutes, um, all other things aside, I hear a couple things. It's that path from
Mm,
um, money to helping other people get money on incentives, and then understanding the value of that weird human behavior thing that
mm,
doesn't have an equation.
yeah.
And then in a business setting, and then in a personal setting. And a couple points. One, I did my own sort of cursory review in the fall with a number of people, and work was like 1/30th of the things on their mind, and every person was struggling with one particular personal thing, and they were different all over the place.
Interesting.
Didn't matter race, creed, sex,
Yes.
color, age, whatever. It was like work was 1/30th, but there was a bigger thing that every single one of them was contending with, and like life-changing things, not just like, oh, I got to
Huh.
find a new person to mow the lawn. um, and the other thing I'll say is, well, two more things. The private equity industry now, which is traditionally just financiers, right? Which is I'll buy
Yes.
a company, number of companies, put them together, create a lot of value in a short period of time, and then exit the company.
Yeah.
And then somebody else will do it. And they've been searching for growth levers, very fast growth levers. And so obviously there's things like financial engineering,
Mm,
like sales acceleration. And the thing that the biggest, baddest ones are working on now, human capital. It's how do we give incentives like profit sharing, for instance, to a manufacturing company and all employees
yes.
to get them all thinking like owners. And
Oh
they
man.
literally can change their lives in the course of a 5 to 7 year hold period, and their families. And then that leads me into, well, this thing where we both started, this actuarial thing, is the essence of human capital. And HR has never traditionally had a seat, quote unquote, at the executive table. And what people are
Yeah.
finally starting to internally understand, especially after COVID, the rise of Gen Z now,
Mm,
is that no company exists without people and humans. And the talent and the human capital that you have is the critical differentiator. And because we didn't have good ways to measure it, understand it, um, design incentives, motivations, the recognition pieces. We have these loose words called culture. And you hear
yes.
very good business people that have been through the trenches in a number of companies point to culture as the number one thing. And then everyone else in the world is like scratches their head and then goes on with their day because it's such a
Yes.
cloudy, fluffy word. What do you mean
Yes.
culture? Like, what is culture? And I think where you're going is what I hear from you is that you've almost started to unlock the secrets of culture on a human to human interaction
Mm,
basis, and then how we can overlay a business setting on that to help both the individuals, their
yeah.
families, the companies, and create more value as a product or service for the rest of the market. That then creates a compounding engine for the economy and the world as a collective whole. And you just so happen to be doing it with a large number of
Yeah.
people across Asia Pacific. And now you're back in Americas. And so, maybe you were early in
Yeah.
APAC, and now you're perfectly suited to do it in the Americas, because sometimes we are slower on the touchy feely stuff, quote unquote, the culture stuff,
Yeah.
but we're good at the like number efficiency stuff, and
It's
it's
absolutely true.
bringing those
Yeah.
two things together.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're in an interesting spot, and I think the next 1 to 2 years are going to be pretty interesting for you. I think your growth curve is probably going to be pretty steep. wherever
I
it
have a,
goes.
I am a little bit, I am a little bit worried when it starts. It's going to start. Um, it's going to
So
be, it's going to happen, and
yeah,
it's just keep, keep hitting the little edges and making sure I know where the edges are, and then starting to slowly get into the center.
yeah. So for people, not to wrap up, but for people who
Hmm.
want to get in touch with you, what's the best place, like a website or something that they should go
Yeah,
to in order to reach out to you and have some further conversation?
yeah. The I've got my own website, kenstearns.com. That's there.
Okay.
The jar is also a good one to go to, thejar.live.
Okay.
And then I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm not shy. I'd say I'm shy about it in a way, or surprised, or I don't know. It's unusual for me, but you can Google me,
Yeah.
honestly, because I've done so many. I have so much content up now with the Jar and Mental Health Today podcasts. Right, those two
Mm,
podcasts have got my name on the internet, so I'm Googleable, especially if you put in the
yeah.
Ken Stearns the Jar or Ken Stearns Mental Health.
Right.
um, you'll see my lovely face.
Love it. Cool. Well, great, Ken. This has been a eye-opening conversation, and obviously you're a wonderful human being and a pretty experienced practitioner in the world of revenue acceleration at scale
Yeah,
internationally. So it's been
that's
fun to
scale.
talk, and yeah, let's stay in touch, man. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting things coming up in the coming years as the world is evolving ever so
Yes,
rapidly.
absolutely, Sean. Really appreciate
Cool.
the giving me a platform, and great to go down a
Yeah,
little bit
for
on memory
sure.
lane, and some great questions to get my brain thinking about some of the why we did what we did, and some of those memories.
I love it. Cool. Well, let's do some stuff together in
Yeah,
24, 25, and on the way into the future.
yeah,
Do some fun
absolutely.
projects.
I'm just starting my third chapter now.
Oh, great. The best one is yet to come.
Yeah, the best.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the other two were for all for, the first two chapters for this, honestly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Well, great. Well, have a great rest of your week and pleasure chatting and enjoy some beautiful weather outside.
Thanks, Sean. Have a great day.
Alrighty. We'll talk to you later.
Bye. Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye.